All right, guys, welcome back to Alaska Cabin Adventures. Today we're going to be talking about the different Ecoflow power stations. We have the Delta 2, the Delta 2 Max, and finally the new Delta 3 Pro. I'm going to go over the different specs and uses and help you decide which one of these might be best for your setup. All right, so before we really dive into the three different options, I want to talk about what a power station even is, just in case you're new to all this. Basically, a power station is a self-contained unit. You can think of it as a battery that can discharge power through AC, DC, and USB. And it can also be charged, all within the same contained portable unit. And we say portable, but we're going to talk more about that in just a second. The other thing I want to mention real quick is that I am not paid by Ecoflow to make these videos. Basically, they send me a power station in exchange for an honest review video. So the opinions that you hear from me today are my honest opinions. They're not paid for or sponsored by Ecoflow in any way. So first of all, obviously these three power stations are very different in size. And while their basic functions are all the same, what their real world applications for are going to be very different. A quick summary here is that we have the Delta 2, the Delta 2 Max, and then the Delta 3 Pro, which is the newer unit. If you guys have watched my channel before, you've already seen the dedicated review videos on the Delta 2 and the Delta 2 Max, but I haven't done one on the Pro 3, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the specs on this one, but I'm going to show you guys how these units function, what you can do with them, and talk a little bit about their best niche application, whether it's an off-grid cabin, home backup, running power tools, or like recharging your batteries while you're out camping, different things like that. So that's what we're gonna get into today. So quickly, I just wanna talk about why these power stations, in my opinion, are superior to a gas generator. The first and most important is that they're all really quiet. We'll talk about just how quiet they are later on, but compared to any gas generator, they're whisper quiet. They make essentially zero noise unless they're being charged or discharging a really high amount of electricity. The other thing about them is that they don't take anything to maintain. You don't have to change the oil, you don't have to refill them with gas. All you have to do is get power back into them, which brings me to the next point, is that they're all very compatible with different types of charging. You can charge them through shore power like AC, just plug it into a wall. You can also charge them with solar, and you can even charge them with DC power, or different combinations of all three of those things. So you could have solar power coming in and also charging with wall power, and you can set it to prioritize the solar so that when the sun goes down, all of a sudden it charges more with the different power sources. Ecoflow also sells a generator, a smart generator that goes with these units, so that the generator will actually kick on when they're getting low on power and only charge until these are charged back up. And then the generator will actually turn back off, which is wild. And if I had enough money for it, I would for sure be buying one of those, because I charge all of these at my cabin with a combination of a solar panel and my gas generator right now. They're also ready to go out of the box. You don't have to do anything. You just pull it out of the box, turn it on, and you've got power wherever you are. Another thing worth noting is that all three of these are expandable. You can buy an extra battery pack for them that will double, triple their capacity. So you can get a lot more life out of each one if you do get those expandable battery packs. The other thing about the Pro 3 that totally puts it in a different class than these two is that it's much more of a home backup system. You can have this plugged in to like a transfer switch or an inlet box at your house, and as soon as the power goes off, if there was to be like a power outage for any reason, hurricane or whatever, it will automatically switch over to the power from the Pro 3 in 10 milliseconds. That is a really quick turnover. So in other words, like your lights might flicker for a quick second, but nothing's gonna shut off. It's basically an uninterrupted power supply, a UPS, for your whole house. And so this kind of puts it in a league of its own in the home backup category. These are great for off-grid power, powering your cabin, powering your camper, your RV, charging things up at camp. But this guy here really is more of a home backup system or a heavy-duty off-grid power system. So if your off-grid setup is more of a house with big appliances, this is definitely going to be the unit for you. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over is the watt hours, which is how much storage each one of these has. To give you an idea, at my off-grid cabin, I use about 1,000 watt hours of electricity in a day, using LED lights, maybe a TV or a coffee pot, charging up a couple things. I can get about a full day's use out of 1,000 watt hours. So this first one, the Delta 2, has 1,024 watt hours. So I can get about 1 day's use out of this one fully charged. The Delta 2 Max is about double that at 2,042 watt hours. The Delta 3 Pro comes in at 4,096 watt hours. So for my off-grid cabin, I could get about 1 day's worth of electricity, 2 days worth of electricity, or 4 days worth of electricity of the Delta 3 Pro. All right, so the next thing to consider is how many watts can these things actually push at a given time? How big of an appliance can you run with them? Starting with the Delta 2, we've got 1,800 watts running with a surge up to 2,700 watts. The Delta 2 Max ups that to 2,400 watts with a surge of 4,800. And then the Delta Pro 3 goes all the way up to 4,000 watts running with an 8,000 watt surge. That's pretty dang impressive. I ran my cabin off a 2,000 watt generator for years and was able to do almost everything I've ever needed. Some of the things I wouldn't be able to do with a 2,000 watt generator is like run any sort of electric heat or an electric oven or big appliances or power tools. Some of the power tools like chop saws and air compressors needed more than my 2,000 watt generator could deliver. So that kind of gives you a ballpark idea. In terms of like everyday things, 2,000 watts is going to be plenty. But when it comes to building and large appliances, you're for sure going to need more than 2,000 watts. So anyway, 1,800, 2,400, 4,096, big time. All right, and then in terms of plugging things in, the first two units are very similar. They have 4 USBs on the front plus 2 USB-Cs. And then on the back, they have 7 AC outputs as well. On the smaller unit, the Delta 2, it only has 2 grounded AC outputs, while on the Max, they upgraded to all of them being grounded outputs. And so you could plug in 7 different standard electrical plugins into either one of these, but on this one, you can do 7 that have a grounded output. And then of course, all the same USB charging on the front. This is where the Delta 3 Pro starts to put itself in a different category. Not only does it have standard 120 AC outputs, it also has 240 AC outputs. And if you're familiar with any kind of home electricity, that's going to be required for things like a washer and dryer, I think electric ovens. Big units that require a lot of power are going to need that 240 output. So this actually has it built onto the unit. The catch is that you can only have 120 on, or you can have the 240 on. You can't be running them simultaneously. All 3 of these units do support DC output as well, but the first 2 have an extra DC output that this one doesn't have, and that's your standard cigarette lighter style DC output, which is a pretty handy little function to have, and I'm surprised that this one doesn't have it, but it doesn't. In terms of charging these units, you have a lot of different ways to get juice back into the batteries. The easiest and most obvious is through shore power or just like an AC wall plug-in. So if you are somewhere that you have access to power, you can just plug it straight into the wall and they will charge very quickly. If they're at full charging speeds, most of these will actually charge in about an hour to an hour and a half's time. Even though they are bigger and have bigger storage capacities, each one has a proportionally bigger charging input that it can handle. So I'll run my 2,000 watt gas generator at the cabin for about hour and a half and completely top off all 3 of these power stations individually. And that's a really amazing thing because for an hour and a half of noise and gasoline consumption, I've got a full day, 2 full days, or even 4 full days of totally silent, off-grid, clean power. So if you don't have access to any kind of AC plug-in, they will also charge with solar. Delta 2 has a single solar input that can take up to 500 watts of input. The Delta 2 Max doubles that with 2 inputs for 500, so 1,000 simultaneous. And then the Delta Pro 3 nearly triples that with 2,600 watts of solar input. And that's also through 2 different solar inputs, one that's high wattage and one that's low wattage. So if you're a serious solar person and have a big solar setup, this can take 2,600 watts of input, which is pretty dang impressive. I need more solar panels out of my cabin. I honestly haven't done much with that yet, but it's definitely on my agenda. So all 3 of these power stations come with an LFP battery, which is a lithium iron phosphate battery. They have more charge cycles than a standard lithium ion battery, and they're a lot safer, especially for indoor use, than lithium ion batteries. The first 2 units, the 2 and the 2 Max, have 3,000 charge cycles before the battery's capacity will diminish to 80%. So you can charge these up and run them totally empty 3,000 times before the battery will be at 80% of its original capacity rating. This one goes all the way up to 4,000 charge cycles. So if we do a little bit of math on that, if there's 365 days in a year, you could get close to 10 years of consistent use of discharging them completely in a single day before you would get down to an 80% battery capacity. And let's be honest, in 10 years, there's probably going to be insane new technology, and these will feel like yesterday's news anyway. So the longevity of them is actually pretty incredible, and it's not the kind of thing that's just going to diminish on you quickly. So it's a good investment for at least 10 years of consistent use. One thing to keep in mind is that these do need to be at above 32 degrees in order to charge. When I first got mine, I had it sitting out on the porch of my cabin, and it gets really cold up here in Alaska, obviously, like -20 is not uncommon out of my cabin. And I quickly learned that it would not charge unless I brought it inside. So I had to drill a hole through my floor and run an extension cable in to charge it. But that was no big deal. And they're totally safe for indoor use. They don't put off any sort of gas or anything like that. One of the best things about these power stations is that they're really, really quiet. Unlike a generator, they put off next to no noise. The times that they are a little bit noisy is when they're charging or when they are discharging a high watt amount. And what's funny is that the loudest of all three of these is actually the smallest one. The Delta 2 has these fans that kick on when it's charging or putting off a lot of juice. That is audible. I mean, it's certainly not loud, but it's audible. You can hear a fan running in the cabin while it's, doing its thing. But then somewhere along the line between the Delta 2 and the Delta 2 Max, they figured out some new cooling technology, I'm just assuming, because this one is almost completely silent at all stages. This one also super, super quiet unless it's putting off massive amounts of power. And yeah, so that's kind of a funny little note that the smallest one is actually the loudest of all three. So that's a basic overview of the specs. How much juice you can get into them, how much juice they can put out, how quiet they are, and how long they'll last. So all that being said, it seems like the Delta Pro 3 would be the obvious choice just because it has more juice, more capacity, more options for running different appliances. So why not just get the Delta Pro 3? Well, there's actually a lot of good reasons why I wouldn't get the Delta Pro 3 in lieu of these two, but there's a lot of reasons I would get this one, just depending on what you're after. So let's talk about portability, because that's a big thing with these. I mean, they are portable power stations. Of course, you could always just get a huge battery bank and an inverter and charger and kind of build your own power station, but none of those options are going to be as portable as one of these power stations. But that is not to say that they are created equally. Obviously, this one is much smaller than this one and then this one. But not only are they obviously different sizes and fit into different profiles of storage, like if you're in a van or a tent, something really small is just going to be so much more convenient for you. But the weight is hugely different. The Delta 2 is only 26 pounds. This guy I can just pick up with one hand, no problem. I mean, easy to take around, pop into different spots. This one here, the Delta 2 Max, gets a good bit heavier at 50 pounds, so double the weight. And 50 pounds, I mean, to each his own, but that's still definitely portable. It's two hands. It's a little bit of lugging. I don't look forward to having to pick it up and move it, but definitely still portable. This Delta Pro 3, on the other hand, man, it's portable, but barely. This thing weighs 113 pounds. I mean, it's a monster. And it comes with this handle in the front that comes out and wheels on the back, so you could drag it around. But in terms of just deadlifting this thing, I mean, it's doable, but man, that sucker's heavy. It's barely portable. And to me, that's a big consideration when it comes to choosing one of these three things. If you're camping or running an RV or just out in the wilderness for a day and you need some power, for sure, the lighter, the better. In which case, the small Delta 2 is going to be significantly better than the Max, and especially the Pro 3. I would definitely not bring this thing camping or van life or anything where it's like you ever have to pick up the unit. I wouldn't bring this. It's insanely big. The only time that I might lug this thing around is like a job site. If I was building somewhere remote and I needed to set up power for running compressors, chop saws, big things like that, I might lug this thing with me, but I wouldn't be looking forward to it. Let's put it that way. All right, but enough talk about these three units. Let's see what they can actually do when we plug them into some real world appliances. All right, so to test these out, I'm gonna drag them over to my building site where my chop saw is. And right out of the gate, I'm gonna show you just how hard it is to lug around this Ecoflow Pro 3. It's doable, but it's gonna take every ounce of strength that my weak little arms have. And it does have this pop out guy here, but that only helps once it's already on the ground. So I gotta lift this 113 pound unit down and drag it over to my chop saw. Ugh. Good thing I've been going to the gym. Just kidding. So test number one for the Pro 3 is, can it run a standard chop saw? I don't actually know exactly how many amps it takes for this chop saw to run, but I don't really care. The point is can it run it? So I'm gonna plug this thing in directly into the front of the Ecoflow and turn on the 120 power and see what it does. Okay, so here goes nothing. No problem, not even a slight hiccup or hesitation when I started it up. All right, now we're gonna see if the Delta 2 Max, the middle of the road power station, can also run this chop saw. I really don't know the answer to this question, and we'll see if this thing will go. Okay, so it did push it, obviously, but I don't know if you guys could tell the difference, but there was a little bit of hesitation on the startup. And just like with a lot of appliances, the startup watts is a lot more heavy than the running watts. And so that's gonna be the big test, is which one of these power stations can handle that initial electricity draw that compressors and chop saws give. So this one barely hung in there. I have a feeling the Delta 2 won't push it at all. But the Delta 2 Max can do a chop saw, but definitely was right at the breaking point of what I think it could handle. Okay, so here is our Delta 2, the standard, the small one. And this one is rated for a 2,000 watt output, or an 1,800 watt output with surges, I think up to like 2,400. So it might start it, but my guess is it's not going to. But we'll see. Nope. Wouldn't do it. It tried to start, and then you could tell the power just wouldn't come out of it. I'm not really sure. In fact, yeah, so the unit was flashing overload. Hopefully I didn't damage the unit trying to do that, but it definitely overloaded this unit, and it's official, the Delta 2 will not run a standard chop saw. All right, next up we're gonna try out my air compressor. And again, this is one of those types of appliances that requires a lot of startup power, not a ton of running power, but that initial startup, it really requires some serious output. We're not even gonna try the Delta 2 on this, we're just gonna try the Pro 3 and the 2 Max, because I'm pretty confident that this will not do the job. So let's go ahead and plug it in to the big boy. No problem. No problem whatsoever, just easily fired right up. Now I'll plug it into the Delta 2 Max. All right, let's see what it can do. Wow, no problem. So it seems like the chop saw was actually more demanding than the compressor was. Granted, this is a really small compressor, so if you've got a bigger compressor, my guess is that the Delta 2 Max would be borderline. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the compressor was easier than the chop saw. Okay, so this is gonna be fun to try out. Here's the teeny tiny little Delta 2. And again, look how small, light, and portable this thing is. This would be a great thing to keep in your car. Especially for this reason right here. A lot of you probably have these teeny tiny little air compressors that are designed to inflate a tire. If you're unlucky enough to get a flat tire out on the road. This plugs into a cigarette lighter on your car. This is my new tiny cabin on wheels that I'm building. And there's no way that I could run this cable from my car's cigarette lighter all the way out to these tires back here, which actually do need inflating. So this is where the Delta 2 and the Delta 2 Max are a better option than the Pro 3. The Pro 3 doesn't have a cigarette lighter output on it for DC, and these ones do. So we're gonna see if this Delta 2 can run this little air compressor strong enough to inflate the tires on my trailer. There it goes. All right, cool. Well, as you guys can see, this little Delta 2 had no problem pumping up this tire up to 50 PSI. And again, really convenient that it has that DC output with the cigarette lighter. So this would be the kind of thing I would for sure keep in my car for road trips. All right, so let's talk about charging these units up. Basically, they come with a power cable that just plugs into the back, which can go into any standard AC 120 plug-in. So here I have shore power. Typically that shore power would be like a generator at my cabin, but since I'm in town, I have actual shore power. So all I have to do is plug this guy in, and it will automatically start charging. And it'll show you on the front, on the display screen, how long it will be until it's done being charged, given this amount that it's taking in. If you don't have a very high input, obviously it'll take longer to charge, or if it's more fully discharged, it'll also take longer. Pretty obvious, but it'll tell you. So in this case, there's already 72% battery in here, but with it plugged in and it's charging at 1100 watts input, it's gonna take 36 minutes for this thing to be fully charged, roughly. Obviously, if it was fully discharged, it would take longer, or if I had less power coming into it, like if I was using solar, or I had a generator that wasn't able to push out a full 1100 watts, it would take longer. You can set how fast these things charge in the app. On the Pro 3, I think you can charge all the way up to like 2600 watts or something. Actually, I think you can charge at 3600 watts on the Pro 3 if you have 240 coming in. And I think you can charge at up to 1800 watts, half of that if you're using 120. So 1800 watts going into the Pro 3 will probably charge it in about 2 hours would be my guess. But if you have a 240 plug, you could get it charged in no time at all. But it's that simple. You just plug it in and away it goes. When it's done charging, it'll automatically shut off. Another really cool thing about these, it has pass-through charging. So while you're charging it from the shore power, you can also be running all of your appliances from the unit. So you don't have to like unplug them and plug them into the shore power while it's charging. It'll basically just use all the shore power that it needs for powering your appliances, and then whatever's left over will go into charging the unit. That way you can just leave everything plugged in, charge it up, and it'll keep running all of your lights or TV or whatever it is, and charging at the same time. And I really, really like that feature about it. So, all right, guys. So welcome inside the tiny cabin on wheels, and you can think of this as just kind of like any old off-grid cabin. And a lot of people ask me about getting electricity into my cabin, and it's actually really simple. All you need is an inlet box. We're so used to outlets, but an inlet is just the opposite. You can just plug in a standard extension cord into the inlet box like that. Plug in the other end, plug the other end of it directly into your Ecoflow unit in the back, into one of the AC powers, and boom, just like that. Ooh, the lights kicked on. We've got power going to the entire cabin. And you can see with the one LED light on, and actually I'll turn the porch light on too, the front of the unit will actually display exactly how much draw is happening and how long the unit will last under that draw. So I just have the two tiny little lights on. So at that, I'm pulling 63 watts of electricity. I'll show you. I'm pulling out 63 watts of electricity, and at that draw, the power will last for 17 hours if I don't charge it back up. And you can also see all of that on the Ecoflow app. I have to say the Ecoflow app is one of the best parts about these products. You can turn the unit off from anywhere. So a lot of times I will go up to bed with all my lights on at the cabin and then just open up the app and click the button and shut down the AC power. The AC power does have a ghost draw on it, unlike the DC power. So just having the AC on will actually draw a really small amount, but some, even if you're not using any power from it. The DC power does not, on the other hand. So at night I like to turn off the AC power just so that I'm not using any extra juice while I'm sleeping. Right, so quick summary, if you guys are looking for something that's really portable for powering laptops, small lights, things like that, I think the Delta 2 is the best option because of how portable it is. If you're looking to charge something like a whole cabin that you might use day in and day out, I think the Delta 2 Max is honestly the sweet spot. As you guys saw, it could even push a lot of big power tools. The storage is twice as much as the Delta 2. That's kind of the perfect unit for like a small off-grid cabin situation. Also really portable. If you want a lot of extra juice while you're out on the road or whatever, that would work too. But the Delta Pro 3 goes into a whole new class of sort of like home power. Obviously, you can't do any sort of 240 power with the other two units. The Delta Pro 3 is definitely the big boy of the lineup. And I think if you're looking to power an entire house, it's hands down going to be the way to go. It also has a lot more capabilities than I realized. You can even do like EV charging. So if you've got like an electric car or want to use an electric car to charge it, it has outlets for that. All sorts of stuff that you can look into more at the Ecoflow website. If you scroll down into the description, I linked all three of these products. You guys can shop around. I want to give a big thanks to Ecoflow for making such awesome off-grid products. And a big thanks to you guys for watching this video. And I'll see you all on the next episode of Alaska Cabin Adventures.